7:02 PM. Could you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. Per school committee policy BDA, which is school committee organizational meeting, I, as the superintendent of schools, do call our annual organization meeting to order, specifically to allow for the election of a new chair who, once appointed, will preside over the remainder of the meeting. So at this time, I will take a motion for a new chair of the regional school committee.
I nominate Tana Jango as the new chair of the regional school committee.
Second?
Any discussion? Okay, so for chair, it has to be by roll call vote.
Diane Duncan, aye.
Sean Nicholson, aye.
Tana Jango, aye.
Lee Martin, aye.
Dorothy Stallion, aye.
Congratulations, Madam Chair. You have the gavel.
So now we'll take a motion for the vice chair.
I make a motion to nominate Lee Martin for vice chair of the school committee.
Second? We'll take a roll call vote. Diane Duncan, aye.
Sean Nicholson, aye.
Tana Jango, aye.
Lee Martin, aye.
Dorothy Stallion, aye.
Now we need a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
All in favor? Or any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Now we need a motion to approve the minutes from May 8th, the open session minutes from May 8th, as well as the executive session minutes from May 8th. Do we do that separately or separately?
Separately, yes.
Okay, so a motion to approve the minutes from May 8th, 2017.
Motion to approve the open session minutes of May 8, 2017.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Then a motion to approve the executive session minutes from May 8th, 2017.
Motion to approve the executive session minutes from May 2017.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. So now we will need some motions to appoint a few people to positions. A nomination for the secretary.
I nominate Diane Duncan as secretary.
Silence gets you nowhere.
I want you to be bored now.
I don't hear a second.
Second.
I won't let that pass. Okay. All in favor, or question?
Should we do roll call or regular?
Just a regular standing vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now we need a motion for the tax library trustee. Are you still interested?
I would appreciate being able to continue to work with the Taft Library trustees.
I nominate Lee Martin for tax library trustees.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
The Restine Fund representative, in the past it's been me, but
Has to just be one of the Upton representatives.
Joe, can you describe that again, the Restine Fund?
So the Racine Fund is a private foundation named after the Racine family. And they basically provide, based upon the Racine estate interest, funding to various projects that affect Upton. So typically, they have a certain allocation for the school district each and every year. They have, how many meetings? Maybe one, possibly 2 meetings per year. Kind of review the finances, but usually there is direct communication from the foundation to Jay's office with regard to letting them know what's out there. And usually when we put in for some type of funding, a lot of times it'll be additional resources as far as things to enrich the curriculum. There's an approval process through the Upton Board of Selectmen.
Thank you.
For example, and not to go on, but I think we talked about earlier in the school year, having mobile laptop carts for the elementary schools. That money came from the Racine Fund.
Oh, okay. That's great. Real fortunate. That's wonderful.
Very nice.
So, do you have to make a motion?
You could nominate Phil.
Yeah, well, give him something to do. He's not here. All right, so I nominate Phil Desutter.
Okay.
My Racine Fund.
Who seconded that?
All right, you did.
I wanna make sure I have that one right.
Oh,
I know it here. I know I've
All in
been here before.
Exactly. All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, Phil will be happy. He will. We need a motion for the assistant treasurer. So, I'm gonna check my notes.
So this was, over the last
It was Pam.
2 years, it was Pam. So maybe
Yeah.
if you describe the heavy lift that this
So
position
the
has.
assistant treasurer, the most work you have to do will be in the next 2 weeks, which means you have to go to the 2 banks and sign the account cards so that they can put your name on the account. And you have to get bonded, which we do, but you have to fill out a form. Beyond that, I would tell you there's probably little or nothing that you'll have to do. It's a pretty easy job all the way around, but there has to be 2 signatories on all the accounts, so you have the treasurer and the assistant treasurer. And it can't be me on either one because I manage the money, so the law says that you need to have somebody else. So Joe Lakey's been the treasurer for the last 5 or 6 years, I would say. Mostly because he's in the office here, and in case something comes up that has to get signed, he's here. Assistant treasurer, the only thing I would say is that you probably don't want to appoint somebody that may not be on the committee a year from now, because then we'd have to go through this all again, get all the signatures again. But it's totally up to you guys.
I don't mind doing that. I don't mind. Or Sean, do you wanna do it? It's not-
Doesn't
Doesn't
matter.
make any difference to me.
I'll strive for it, but. No, it doesn't
You tell
matter.
me.
I'm willing to, I live just here, so
Yeah,
it's
it's
not that hard to
Right,
do.
he actually does,
Okay.
but
All right, yeah, sure.
Okay, so I nominate Sean Nicholson for assistant treasurer.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We need a motion, now, we're gonna make a motion for Joe
Lakey.
Lakeview
Yes.
to.
Well, it's up to you.
To be treasurer.
It's actually
Well, you-
within your
you guys-
discretion.
You guys probably do need somebody here on campus available to do that, so. So I make a motion to nominate Joe Lakeview for our treasurer.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Joe's okay with that, right?
Doesn't matter.
He's not, he's one of those, not here.
Yeah, no, he's okay with it, he's okay. with it.
He's fine with
Yes.
that, okay. Make a motion for the clerk to the school committee? I make a motion to nominate Kelly McElrath, am I saying that right, Kelly?
Yep.
As our school committee clerk.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Kelly.
My pleasure.
Make a motion for the Blackstone Valley Educational Consortium?
I make a motion to nominate Joe Maruschek for the Blackstone Valley Educational Consortium representative.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now we're on to the election of school council subcommittees and budget.
So this, it's pretty simple math here.
Yep.
For each of these, we have a total of 4 subcommittees. Each subcommittee has 3 people, so last time I checked, 4 times 3 is 12. There are 6 of you. 12 divided by 6 is 2. So all of you should be on 2 subcommittees for it to be clearly equitable. So sort it out amongst yourselves.
Do we, are we going to use the, hold the views?
Yeah, it's in the background notes.
So I pulled together just like a quick, using your Survey Monkey or whatever that
It was just a Google form.
Google form. So I just kind of threw them together based on that, so budget would be, well, I didn't have Dorothy, I didn't have your input, so, you know, if you're not comfortable with any of this, just speak up. Budget, Phil, Tana, Diane. Policy, Dorothy, Lee, Tana. Negotiations, Tana, Sean, and Phil. Superintendent evaluation, Lee, Diane, and Sean, and then, I didn't ask you about this, Sean, but, Golden Apple, well, we had a discussion.
That's really ad hoc.
Yeah,
That's, it's a survey too, so don't worry about
okay,
it.
okay.
Perfect.
Does everyone feel okay with that? Okay. So do we make, how do we do this, Joe? Do we make a motion?
I would make a motion
Individual?
for each subcommittee, just the
Okay.
3 people that'll serve on that subcommittee.
Okay,
The budget was,
so I'll make a motion. So I make a motion to appoint for the budget subcommittee, Phil Desato, Tana Django, and Diane Duncan. Is that good?
Second.
all in favor?
Aye. Okay. I make a motion to nominate for the school committee policy subcommittee, Dorothy Scally, Lee Martin, and Tana Django.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I make a motion to nominate for the school committee negotiation subcommittee, Tana Django, Sean Nicholson, and Phil Desutter.
All in favor?
I don't think we had a second.
Sorry, I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye. And I make a motion to nominate for the school committee superintendent evaluation committee, subcommittee, Lee Martin, Diane Duncan, and Sean Nicholson.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we'll continue to do Golden Apple ad hoc. I know you said that you,
Yeah, we
and
want to serve on
I
that.
love doing it, so
Yeah.
I'm happy to continue, and Sean, if you wanna join us.
Yep, I do.
Yeah, I will,
I
Yeah.
always feel like the more the better, you know, to get everyone in there. So that's good. Okay. Are we all reorganized?
I think we are.
Okay.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is community comments. Okay, so if we can move along to superintendent comments.
All right, good evening. First and foremost, it's not on the agenda, but I want to welcome somebody in the audience, and it's Joshua Crosby, who's here. He's very nicely dressed in his scouting uniform, so I just want to say welcome, Josh. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
Is this for a badge or something?
Yeah, this is, I have to attend some meeting or something and take notes for, requirement for the Boy Scout Communication Smart Badge.
Okay, cool, excellent.
We're glad you joined us.
We'll take copious notes. First off, an agenda, once again, we had a very, very successful commencement exercise last week. As a matter of fact, 2 of you had kids who graduated. As I said in my speech, they were a class small in size, but very high in stature and achievement. So we're very proud of the 120 students that graduated. Also a real successful week, as I put in the background notes, once again, the second year that we did the senior walk at the 2 elementary schools and the middle school. Very, very touching, both from the students' perspectives, but also seeing their younger peers and the staff members and the effect that it had on it. So something that we're very, very excited about maintaining. Just to kind of give you an update with regard to enrollment, I think we have, we've got a bit of a pleasant surprise in the sense that as I do each year, particularly around budget time, when I give the enrollment projections, I believe I said that we would be looking at about 35 fewer students in the district next school year. Well, today on June 5th, I'm going to eat those words for the simple reason that we are getting a larger kindergarten enrollment than we anticipated. But the big mover is the number of students that we will have matriculating to Nipmuc. In our enrollment projections, we had something in the ballpark of about 150. And we used basically a 5-year average percentage-wise of how many kids from the 8th grade matriculate over historically. This year, we've got 198 current 8th graders, and right now, we've got 166 of those 198 coming over. So we've typically been more in the ballpark of around 140, so that's a shift of about 26 kids. So right now, that freshman class of 166 doesn't include a single choice student. So I think that, you know, as I say in the background notes, what has been down this year has been, first of all, the number of applicants to BVT, and then the number of, therefore, acceptances, and therefore the number of enrollments. We have right now, as of the last Friday, a grand total of 28 in this year's 8th grade class going to BVT, whereas it's typically been trending more in that 45 range. So in many ways, it's a good problem to have. So I will keep you posted. You know, as I also say in the background notes, at times BVT seems to go through a wave of acceptances where they'll do an initial and then they'll do a second. And you know, I had an in-depth conversation with John Clements, and I said, well, you know, we've got these 166 kids locked into a schedule. We've already shuffled the schedule. Are we going to get, you know, July surprises and August surprises? And he said, you know, unfortunately, sometimes that happens, but, you know, they'll call another round. But, so that's where we are, and I will keep you posted. Like I said, our kindergarten is a little bit higher, particularly in Upton, but we were also anticipating a bump in 17-18 based upon the birth rates in 2012. Okay. Second piece is just a reminder, the K-12 Insight Survey, which we administered last June to all students at MISCO and the high school, all staff, and all of our parents. We are once again going to administer it. We're looking to open up that survey for 2 weeks, starting 1 week from today. We will have direct notification to parents going out this week, and then they administer everything. So the link goes directly from K-12 Insight to all of the stakeholders. We don't control it in any way, but we will send out the notice that please look for this. Okay? And then the last piece is an update on the FY18 budget. I included in your packet the latest cherry sheet based upon the Senate budget. So last week, the Senate passed a $40.8 billion budget. And initially, from the Senate Ways and Means proposal, we actually were looking at a loss of about $17,000 in regional transportation. However, Senator Ann Goby, who's from Worcester County, who also represents a lot of regional school districts, put in an amendment to restore the 1 million. So we're basically back to the status quo of what the House budget had us at. Needless to say, it is a little bit disappointing as far as what we're looking at as far as state aid, as the net increase in Chapter 70 funding. We're in the category of the absolute minimum of $30 additional per student, which translates to about $45,000. And a lot of this, you know, in speaking to our two senators, both Senator Fatman and Senator Moore, really is directly tied to looking at the benchmarks in tax revenue, where at the last benchmark point, the state was down about $450 million in FY17 revenue. So they're not about to put themselves out there. They did put in language toward some of the recommendations towards the Foundation Budget Review Commission recommendations, largely around the Chapter 70 formula, but at this time, there's absolutely no positive effect in Chapter 70 funding, at least for FY18. So that's the status quo. It now goes off to conference committee. They'll be working on that over the next month, and typically the FY18 budget usually is finalized in that ballpark of around July 15th, within a couple weeks after the start of the fiscal year.
So the recommendations from the review commission, does that take the form of an amendment to the Chapter 70? Is that how that works? Or?
Yeah, what it was is it was actually a budget amendment. And the verbiage that you see in there that was voted on by the Senate does go into effect incrementally as far as, you know, it really gets into the weeds as far as what are the exact amounts that go into things like elementary enrollment, full day K enrollment. But right now, it actually hasn't been implemented because it hasn't gone through conference committee.
Yeah, okay.
But the standard response that I've gotten is, okay, it's great to have that language, but right now, the money's just not there, unfortunately. And that's my report.
Thank you. We'll move on to subcommittee updates. Go from Apple Award Subcommittee.
Yep, so the nomination form went out, and nominations will be open till June 12th, so we encourage, parents in the community that this is a nice opportunity to nominate, not necessarily an educator, but somebody who works in Minden Upton Regional School District that you feel is gone above and beyond the call of duty, and the form is very quick and easy to fill out. And we'll be accepting nominations until June 12th. And it will transpire very quickly from the time that we close nominations to the point where we're gonna be, awarding the Golden Apple on the 19th. So we should probably set a date to, I don't know who's interested in serving this time around, but I don't know if anybody has actually, I'm gonna pull up my calendar really quick. The 13th available, if that would work for anybody? Tuesday the 13th?
For reviewing the nominations.
Yep, for going through all of the nominations, it's kind of quick, and if we need to go a little further out, we could do.
What time are you thinking of beginning?
I'm totally flexible.
Yeah. I think
It
the
really
13th is
depends
good
on
for
when
me.
people could meet.
Yeah, 13th is good.
13th would work for you?
It depends on the time.
Well, let's go later.
Later I could do,
So
or, you know, I
you-
couldn't do, it would have to be after 5 o'clock.
Oh,
Well, Tuesday, yeah. Yeah, I'm flexible too.
alright, so why don't we do, so that's the 13th.
Yeah, works for me.
You too, Dorothy? That's good? Alright, so why don't we wanna do 6:30, 7 o'clock?
6:30.
Alright, let's go with 6:30.
Here,
Is that okay, Joe, if we
Or
use
guys
this
go-
room?
It's perfectly fine.
Okay. Okay, so Tuesday, June 13th at 6:30 in this location. Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, so then we'll report out on the 19th.
Yes. Sounds good.
Actually, the reward.
I was gonna say,
Award.
report and award.
Give our,
Next on the agenda is this negotiations subcommittee. We met 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago.
I feel like it was 3 weeks ago.
I think it's more like 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago.
And the meeting was relatively short. We have another meeting tomorrow
Mhm.
at 5 o'clock with the teachers' union. And looking forward to moving forward with the negotiations. On to the old business, a follow-up on the kindergarten recess.
My understanding, Dorothy, you were present at that
Yeah.
meeting, right? Is Jan Gallagher and Deb assembled a group of teachers, predominantly kindergarten teachers, because I think the focus of the meeting was on how kindergarten is used. And parents, back on the 15th of May. And really the focus of the discussion was on kindergarten recess and use of unstructured playtime and free time and so on. And it's my understanding the consensus of the group was to kind of ensure greater consistency between Clough and Memorial. And specifically looking at that last half hour of the day, 2:30 to 3 o'clock. I had the opportunity to touch base with a couple kindergarten teachers, and their feeling was that it was wise to have consistency, particularly at the tail end of the day, because the little guys, I think the expression I heard was are shot. So, anything that I'm missing, or as far as?
No, I mean, it was pretty much that, and I mean, I think both schools were doing similar things, just in different formats. And so, keeping it consistent, I think, will be helpful.
Is there discussion of meeting again?
I think they were just gonna go ahead and look at changing the schedule at Memorial.
Okay.
The plan was is to kind of, Clough was gonna send over some schedules, and they were gonna kind of look at what they were doing, and then change the schedules at Memorial and have it kind of uniform.
So the idea was that the issues, whatever they were, would be resolved if these changes would take place?
Yes.
Okay. So the last half hour in the school day being for non-structured playtime was satisfactory? Good, that's cool.
That's great. I think it's awesome, because
I mean, I
think
think
there
they-
needs to be greater consistency
Yeah.
between our two elementary schools. But I also think that making sure that happens speaks to social emotional learning and having that opportunity to be refreshed and to bring your best self to the table, when you're a little guy like that. So I think it's great. I think it's great that people are willing to work together too.
It's a nice collaborative effort.
Yeah, I
between the
think,
two
I mean,
schools.
Yeah.
it was a very collaborative effort, and I think, everybody felt like they got up from the table, and that
Felt
what
like
wanted
we
to be
moved forward.
accomplished was accomplished, and
Good.
Sounds
That's good.
long as everything proceeds as expected, which I would expect that it would, so.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that if it doesn't, somebody will come forward and let us know. No, I mean that,
Yeah.
I mean that genuinely, like
Yeah.
that if they feel like the problem hasn't been resolved and that students aren't getting what they need, then somebody would speak up and we can revisit it and make sure that what we said was going to happen is going to happen, but I trust that it will.
Yeah.
I agree. I have full faith in that collaborative effort that it will have been resolved once they get everything in line for next year, so I think that's great.
Should we check back with anybody on that?
But that's the reason I was asking if there was another meeting set up, but we feel that right now,
There was not another meeting set up.
You can always, under old business,
Can maybe bring it back up in like.
bring it back up as
Yeah.
far as, some
Maybe
specific
in the
steps
fall.
that have been taken.
Yeah.
Or just, I mean, they were planning to implement it right away, so.
oh, they were,
Yeah, so I would guess that we can check in and have a report back by the 12th.
okay.
I was gonna say, can we just add it to our agenda for old business, and Joe, could you reach out to both of our principals and
Absolutely.
check in to see what
Mhm.
changes have been made and make sure that there's that alignment?
Sure.
Thank you.
Great. On to new business, I believe. The presentation of the data related to inclusion practices.
Okay, well, thank you again. I have a really lengthy slide presentation here. As a matter of fact, it's 37 slides, which is just ridiculous. Okay, so some of these I'm gonna go through very, very quickly. Data, when you're really trying to answer some questions, can be very, very overwhelming. And what I'm gonna get into in this presentation kind of speaks to decisions that have been made to look at data in different ways. Each November, myself and Maureen and the principals talk about MCAS data. And we generally try to give you the, 5-mile-high view of this. This digs a little bit deeper, and this is really disaggregating into how are we doing with regard to inclusion practices, and are inclusion practices really making a difference a la student performance, okay? So what's the rationale for doing this? Well, keep in mind, one of the major strategic initiatives within our districts, within our 5-year strategic plan, has been around inclusion practices. We've also made significant investments since the 13-14 school year in staffing and professional development, particularly at the elementary and the middle levels. And the co-teaching model has been established, and it really started in grades 3 and 4, particularly in 13-14 school year. That's when some of the first investments were made. And some of our expansions have occurred, particularly since the override, looking at the lower elementary grades, 1 and 2, and then grade 5 at the middle school. So I think it's really kind of important that we're very explicit about why are we doing this. So I put there really kind of something known as a theory of action, which is simply an if-then type statement, that basically our assumption is if we provide students with disabilities with high-quality instruction within the regular classroom setting, using a model where you've got a classroom teacher and a special educator co-teaching, then achievement and growth of students with disabilities will increase. But the second piece is all students, not just students with disabilities, will also benefit from this type of model. Okay, reasonable theory of action, okay? And really underpinning that theory of action is the fact that we want all of our kids to get high quality content. okay? That we don't want a situation where students, yes, are getting specialized instruction, but the content might be different than the content that's in the regular classroom setting. So over the last, I want to say at least 3 or 4 months, our district leadership team has kind of been doing a data dig as far as looking at multiple sources of data to ascertain what's happening with regard to inclusion. So we made a strategic decision in doing a disaggregation to look at 2 grades, grades 3 and 4 across the district during 2 academic years, last year and the year before. Okay, there was kind of a consensus of, we could look at 13, 14, but that was almost, in essence, like a pilot year, okay? So what we first looked at was MCAS, as far as looking at ELA and math data, and disaggregating it down by individual classrooms, okay? And in the case, looking at overall performance, how many kids were proficient, and then also looking in grade 4 at growth, using SGP, or student growth percentile. Then we also looked at a benchmark assessment that we give all of our kids, known as the Scholastic Reading Inventory, or the SRI, which has overall performance, but also growth. And then we also looked at student attendance, okay? We wanted to, in the beginning of this dig, to also look at disciplinary data, but at the elementary level, disciplinary data is, for the most part, paper, okay? There really is nothing electronic that's easy to, unless you want to go through Jan Gallagher's notebooks with a bunch of things stuffed in. It really wasn't very reliable data. It would have been way, way too cumbersome. But the assumption is, again, going back to the theory of action, that kids in a co-teaching type situation should feel well supported, therefore is indicated in positive outcomes as far as improved attendance, lower disciplinary infractions, and again, higher achievement and higher growth.
So just as level set, so when did the inclusion program take place?
Really, and these 2 target grades for the very first time in 13, 14.
Okay, so 13, 14, the year before the data was pulled.
Correct.
All right, so there's a possibility that obviously you could have had huge MCAS scores before the program came in, so we don't really have a normalization.
So you're bringing, maybe it's slide number 34. You're bringing up a great point. I think there's some, and you'll see some very, very positive trends here, but the really challenging piece here is there are a ton of variables.
Yes.
Like, let me just throw one at you. In one of those years, the elementary grades changed their literacy series. And the year after, they changed their math series.
Yeah.
Then you get into issues with, do you have a team that's cohesive, that stayed in place, or did somebody leave? Or did somebody go out half the year on maternity leave? So there's a lot of different variables.
Yeah.
However, there's also some very positive trends. So just kind of looking at, I think it's important to lay out our demographics. So we've kind of been trending toward something in the ballpark between 15–16% of our students district-wide have disabilities. Generally, as you progress through the grades, the numbers become higher because that's when students are diagnosed, usually a lot of times in those later elementary, early middle school grades. So you see the numbers there for the 2 years, grades 3 and 4. So the column, number of total students with disabilities, and then number of students with disabilities that are in an inclusion setting. Okay, so keep in mind, not all of our students are in an inclusion classroom. You might have some students who have some very significant disabilities that are in a pull-out, substantially separate classroom. You might have some students that have an IEP, but it's just for speech-language services, or maybe OTPT, that they're not in an inclusion classroom. So I think that's something also careful to watch. So the first piece of data, before I get ahead of myself, as far as the service delivery in an inclusion setting, generally it's one special educator splitting time in a couple grade 3 and grade 4 classrooms, okay? Usually what will happen is that special educator will be co-teaching or using some type of flexible grouping within the classroom setting. Oftentimes, there's also additional support where if it's a real intensive project, it'll kind of be all hands on deck. It's not uncommon to go into inclusion classroom and you'll see 3 or 4 small groups where you'll have the classroom teacher, a special educator, you'll have a paraprofessional, maybe a Title I or an academic tutor, and kids are constantly circulating. So it's very much a dynamic type atmosphere.
Joe, can you go back a slide? I just have a quick question to ask you. So under grade 3, 2014-15, you've got 32 students with disabilities.
That's district-wide.
District-wide in grade 3, and only 17 are in inclusion classrooms. And you said that some of them are just speech and language.
Mhm.
Are some of those kids on an IEP, but they're just not in an inclusion classroom?
Some-
Or did you purposely try to put kids who could benefit from these services into an inclusion classroom? Because not every 3rd grade classroom has inclusion.
Correct.
So we're only serving like half
That year.
that particular year. So that means that some of these kids who could be in an inclusion classroom are not, just because we didn't have it spread out across all.
I think the answer to your question is a little bit complex in the sense that if you look at those kids in grade 3, and then you look what happened to them next year as 4th graders, 5 additional were in classrooms, were in inclusion classrooms. So I think that's a staffing issue, okay, in the sense that there was an increase in staffing because the summer of 15 is when the override passed.
Yep.
Okay? And then also, some of it might be how many kids were in the language-based classroom, which is a pull-out classroom, and so on. So it's kind of, to answer your question, the 17 out of 32 that year probably directly speaks to a staffing issue, but it's also, with that particular class, you might have a higher degree than usual in a substantially separate type setting.
Okay.
Okay?
And also to add, so that was the year right after kind of our pilot year, that 13-14 year,
Yep.
so it took some time to get kids out of the pullout from ELA and math and into inclusion setting, so that might be why there's some of the tape.
Okay. Thank you.
So, and you're bringing up, please ask away, you're bringing up some good points, and the deeper we get into this. Data is extremely messy, and you're going to see some messy things here. But this is the standard slide that we typically show every year during the MCAS presentation. So if you were to look at grade 3, MCAS, ELA, and a wider trend, and I believe what we have here is what, about 8 years worth of data points. You see the trend in green for our district, and you see the trend for the state. Okay, but overall, a gradual upward trend in performance with last year, 78% of our kids being proficient. Something that we don't show you is disaggregating, pulling out our kids that do have disabilities. How did they do? Okay? By no means are we satisfied with a hair under 50% of our kids being proficient or advanced, but realize it's been a sharp trend upward, okay? So what I'm gonna show you now is,
So this would be including whether inclusion is
this
in
is
there or not.
all kids who
Everyone,
have
right.
disabilities.
Understood.
Okay? So what I'm gonna show you now is, these are the 8 third grade classrooms in the district. Okay? The ones that you see in orange, yellow, are inclusion classrooms. Okay, and so I just wanted to show a quick visual reminder, a visual representation rather, of what it looks like. Okay, so you've got classrooms that are inclusion with co-teaching going on that are pretty much very comparable to what the average proficiency rate is. Okay? So this was in the 14-15 school year, and again in the 15-16 school year. So if we take a look at the math trend, again, a nice trend upward for the district, where 87% proficient in advance. But again, just like with the ELA, a nice trend upward for our students with disabilities. Okay, as you compare it, relatively speaking, to the state, which is relatively flat. So again, looking at our math, if you look at the grade 3 again, in yellow are the inclusion classrooms. This is actually trends at average or higher than the non-inclusion classrooms. So this was 14-15 school year. Here is the 15-16 school year, again in math, those same 3 inclusion classrooms. One of the 3, it was 100% proficient.
It's impressive.
Very impressive.
Was that the same, does that reflect the same teachers?
Yes, it actually, a great question. What I did is I made these match up. There's no identifiers by school or by teacher, but they are consistent. The only place where they're not consistent would be in the event that there was change
That change.
from 14-15 to 15-16, and we did have a couple instances of this. So again, looking at MCAS for grade 4, okay, there was overall, and I should say about MCAS grade 4, those poor 4th grade teachers, no matter the district, it's always the grade that gets beaten up. I know from my Mansfield days. It's of all the tests, it's the test with the highest cut score. Okay, so it's a challenging because it is a gateway grade. But you see an overall upward trend in the district, overall flat statewide. But again, that same upward spike in the performance of our students with disabilities. Again, we're nowhere near where we want to be, but it's a positive trend. So if we take a look at how we've done as far as ELA, again, 3 different classrooms, but they are, again in yellow, those are the inclusion classrooms. And what I've put off to the right are the student growth percentiles, SGP. Anything that is higher than 60 is generally considered to be high growth. So you can see where we are. As a matter of fact, if you look at classroom H, has one of the higher SGPs at 71.0. So again, if we look at spring of 16, this generally trends around average or lower than average as far as performance, as far as percent proficient. And then looking at the math piece, again, a general trend upwards versus a flat performance from the state, and an upward trend with regard to how our students with disabilities are doing. I did notice in tracking this, there's actually a couple data points there where we were lower than the state average as far as how students with IEPs were doing. So again, if you look at grade 4 by classroom, below the average on a district in 14-15, and then a slight trend upward in grade 4 in 15-16. So generally speaking, in looking at this, like I said, it's a clear increased proficiency rate in the past 3 years as far as performance in students with disabilities. Our grade 3 inclusion classrooms very much show proficiency rates equal or greater than the non-inclusion classrooms, whereas grade 4 is equal or lower. However, the SGP showed some significant improvement this past school year.
It's hard to know and I know Dennis, you could dive into the exact disability types in each grade level, but did you guys look at specific learning versus, more significant, or you just looked broadly?
Yeah, that's another layer to dig down, and I can show you some of the ways that we actually dug into this data, and sometimes, and particularly, we'll show the SRI. You're talking about taking, CSV Excel files and going through kid by kid, highlighting kids and so on. It can be pretty laborious, but that is a great suggestion. So this I'll go through very, very quickly. So this is the attendance data for grade 3. As you can see, we have absolutely horrible attendance rates in the Mendon-Upton Regional School District. My God, it's horrible. But same type thing, we highlighted the inclusion classrooms in yellow. And you can generally see it's a range anywhere between 95 to about 97% is the annual attendance rate. I'm going to go through these really quickly because, to be 100% honest, it's a big nothing burger. So there really is no statistically significant. One thing that we did notice is there was better attendance in 15-16 versus 14-15. If you recall, 14-15 was the winter from hell, and attendance across the board was slightly worse. So then the third piece is a benchmark assessment. We give all of our kiddos in grades 1 through 4 3 times annually, known as the Scholastic Reading Inventory. It's generally used as a benchmark assessment to help really inform progress to our classroom teachers. It's another data point. The data is reported out on something known as Lexile score, which is just another metric in looking at, is the student on grade level as far as reading for their grade. So we chose to take a look at this data in looking at growth, movement of Lexiles. Because keep in mind, in grades 3 and 4, you've got a pretty dramatic range where you've got some kids, starting the 3rd grade, reading on a 1st grade reading level, and then you've got kids in the 4th grade already reading on a high school reading level. So there's a whole continuum. So it's kind of looking at some of the overall change in Lexile. So kind of the 5,000 foot view, looking at, this we broke down at looking at students with disabilities strictly in an inclusion setting, and then versus all students. So if you take the median growth of the students in 3rd grade, it's about 225 versus all students, 130. You see a pretty significant difference as far as the inclusion students, as far as the gains that they've made, particularly at grade 3. Grade 4 also a difference as far as increased growth versus looking at all students. And I'll drill it down a little bit more. So that was the data for 14-15. Here's the data for 15-16. Again, it very much mirrors the previous year where there's some real significant growth happening in grade 3. So again, drilling that down by individual classrooms, and this is a little bit of a different look at it as far as taking a look at what was the median Lexile in the fall versus the median Lexile in the spring, and then what was the difference in change. Okay, so if you look at that bottom category, that bottom row rather, that's all the kids, Clough and Memorial in 3rd grade. So you see what the change is. And then, again, highlighted are the 3 classrooms that are inclusion classrooms for grade 3.
And that was the first year.
The first year that we looked at.
That you're gathering.
Okay, so you can see 2 out of the 3 inclusion classrooms have a gain that's larger than the overall median for all 180-something kids that were 3rd graders that year. So again, looking at grade 4, you have 1 inclusion classroom that's pretty close to the average, 1 that's markedly higher than the median. This is in 15-16. And then looking at grade 4 data, you've got 2 that are clustered right around the average. And then last school year, 1 of the inclusion classrooms was the absolute highest as far as gains, and then 1 was right behind it. So pretty dramatic, 168, 160 as far as Lexile gains versus the overall median of 115. Okay? So, again, to kind of recap with regard to SRI, 3rd grade showed some real significant growth as compared to all students. Most of your 3rd and 4th grade inclusion classrooms were either around or above the average, and like I just said, 15-16 showed a very significant improvement for 4th grade inclusion classrooms. So to kind of to summarize all of this, and like I said it before, there's a lot of variables here. I talked about, in 2 consecutive years, we had a shift in our literacy series and then a shift in our math series. That really changes a lot of things. I don't think it's a surprise. I think there could be a lot of things as far as looking at the differences between the 3rd grade data and the 4th grade data. The 3rd grade team has been very, very consistent, works very, very well as a cohesive team, and there's been, in the 3rd grade, fewer changes in personnel than there's been in the 4th grade, particularly in one of the buildings. But like I said, there's also been lapses just in these 2-year data set to things like maternity leaves, illnesses, and so on. But I think the bottom line is we've got some initial trends that are very, very positive. I think the deeper we got into this as a team, I think you start to ask more questions. To me, one of the first questions I ask is, well, what can we do longitudinally? I'd be excited to take a look at the 14, 15 3rd graders, last year's 4th graders, now what did they do this year as 5th graders? To kind of follow one cohort of kids. There's a bunch of different ways. I didn't even get into the SMI data, which is a little bit messier than some of our SRI data. But I think there's a lot of positive trends, and like Dennis said earlier, we're still learning, just like the kids. We're still learning what are the best possible structures, what are the best practices to work with kids. But again, I think we've got some positive data trends here.
I think it was well worth the effort and the change in getting kids back into the inclusion versus the co-op, because they've got such a much more rich exposure, because you've got double the amount of kids to be exposed to the language content, just the higher level thinking and things like that within the classroom. The 3rd grade bump, the 3rd grade, just in the quick look through, did the 3rd grade each year tend to, for the 14, 15, and 15, 16, did they tend to do a little bit higher than the 4th grade?
Yes.
And I wonder if it's just because that, but that was the first year that everyone was included in this model, correct?
I would say
Beyond the
14,
pilot, they
yeah.
did the pilot
Yeah.
year, but was that one classroom or was that 3 classrooms?
That was one.
Yeah, so that makes a huge difference.
Mhm.
That's just, I love the use of data and trying to drill down on trying to focus on specific cause and effect that you're trying to establish. And the fact that it suggests next steps means that you probably did do a pretty good analysis, so.
I think one of the things that we've discussed as a leadership team is the conundrum being, okay, so say you have a team that is a well-oiled machine, where you've got a certain 3rd grade teacher and a certain special educator that they're very tight, they work well with each other, they plan with each other, and so on. Do you keep that well-oiled machine together, or does the philosophy need to be, hey, everybody in the 3rd grade team needs to be an inclusion teacher? So you share the wealth, so to speak. I think that's something that, in working with, over the last 3 or 4 years, the consultant Donna Simone, her philosophy would be, we've got to give PD to all teachers. Everybody needs to learn how to be a team teacher, because this isn't just for one person. But when you you could go through this very carefully and realize I took the SRI and the MCAS data, and the classrooms are consistent, okay? There's some classrooms where there's just amazing things happening, and it's borne out by data.
Yeah.
And, you know, you see that type of data, and you see the effects that, you know, it's had on individual kids. You know, I was the person pouring through the SRI data. We've had some kids that, you know, their Lexile gains were like 500 points in 1 year. And you know, you drill down, you say, okay, maybe I need to shadow that little kid for a day and see what's actually happening to make that powerful of a difference. But I think that's the conundrum, when you know that there's some real powerful, amazing things happening between this team of teachers, you don't wanna break up the band, so to speak. You know?
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking to that point, Joe, when you did your pilot year, 2013-14, how did you identify which classrooms were gonna pilot this inclusion program? Did you do it based on, like, I'm just kind of interested in general, like, did you identify a team because you felt like this teacher would lead this practice the best?
I think it was a bit of all of the above, right?
And so it was actually on one of our PD committees, one of the professional development days, there was a focus group on inclusion. So there was general ed teachers that were really interested in doing more on inclusion. So they kind of became guinea pigs for us, so to speak. And then we hired a special education teacher and made sure that those general ed teachers that could be working in a team were part of that interview process. So we kind of started the connection right away with the hires for that special ed teacher and the general ed teacher. And so they took it from there.
Was there any selection of students, specific students to participate in those settings?
It was just by the grade level, and certainly we took into consideration what kids would definitely benefit from the inclusion cohort. But also kept in mind, you know, some of the kids are still receiving services from the pull-out, and, you know, we're making, you know, effective progress in that area as well. So
There's two things that jump out at me from this data. One is that the impact on the, what's the term for non-SWD students?
Typically
Typical developing students. The impact on them, I would start focusing on them as well, to see what they're.
Yeah, that's another disaggregation where you can pull out just typical students that are in the inclusion class,
And then
set.
the second one is, I would go back further in history to try to get a baseline.
Yeah.
Because you may be in the middle of the impact of the program actually decrease the values, and you're seeing an increase back to the mean. So you don't really know that unless you look further back in history to establish.
Correct. Yeah, I think this clearly has a lot of limitations.
Yeah.
And it's clearly only a 2-year snapshot. But I think it was important to go through this exercise because, again, we've made inclusion one of the major initiatives within this district. And I think it's a bit troubling to see how few districts actually track this very, very carefully. It's also really troubling to see what little research is out there, some real solid quantitative research around the benefits of inclusion. I think most of us feel like inclusion is like motherhood and apple pie, that of course I want my child in the least restrictive environment and they need to be with their peers and so on. But I think it's incumbent upon us that we need to track this data. We need to see what are the positive effects of this, if any, if for no other reason, the amount of time, money, and energy that's gone into it.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And, you know, I'm sitting here, you've mentioned a few of the factors. I'm thinking of 10 more factors in my brain.
Yeah.
That skew this data.
And I do think it's also important to always look at multiple measures. We don't have a lot here, But again, you know, this becomes messy and troubling again next year, because this year the kids got the MCAS 2.0, and are we talking something that's apples and oranges versus the legacy MCAS test? So,
The other thing too is, you know, when you started this, you talked about, you know, what is the purpose? And it was kind of a dual purpose. It was to increase, you know, the growth for our students with disabilities, but it was also to lift up our students that are typically developing. I mean, it really depends on what your true focus is too. Like, if it really is about the students with disabilities, keeping them in the classroom and delivering education in a way that they're not missing out on the classroom experience and a lot of content, then maybe focusing in on those students, if this is, you know, the biggest reason why we're doing this.
that's correct.
Did you share this data with the classroom teachers?
Have not done that yet, but I plan on doing so.
This should make them feel
And,
really good.
and actually, and there's one layer that I didn't have enough time to add another 10 slides, is the whole SMI piece. There's a lot of the SMI piece particularly tracks back to some of the significant gains that we've made in math and MCAS, so there is a fairly good correlation there.
I'm sure the teachers will feel a lot of pride
Yeah,
and
they should,
validation in their efforts.
they certainly
for
should,
inclusion.
because it really is making a difference.
Yeah, and it certainly has probably changed the way they deliver education for those inclusion classrooms. It was, there's a learning curve to that, and an adoption of a different philosophy.
Absolutely.
It's exciting.
Cool. Thank you.
And then the approval of the Nipmuc engineering field trip. And,
Okay, so speaking of exciting,
There you go.
just as a background, this is actually pretty cool. I think if you probably remember back in March, Dave Quinn came before the committee to kind of explain what maker spaces are and some of the work and so on. So they've gotten something very modest up and running at Nipmuc. And Dave has paired with Rebecca Ides, both AP Physics and Engineering students, on a makerspace project where they intend this Thursday to launch a weather balloon that they've constructed, equipped with a GoPro camera and also various measuring devices on it. So the game plan is, and they've, you know, his background, his explanation explains it, that they've been tracking weather patterns and wind currents and so on, that if they were to launch it from Nipmuc, it would end up landing in the ocean, which is not what they want. So they're actually, the game plan, and again, it keeps varying based upon the weather pattern, is that they would be looking to launch it at the Nipmuc, and I think this is just irony, Nipmuc State Forest in Union, Connecticut, so that it could land in Upton, okay? That's what he's telling me. So.
He's so probably impressed.
So, I don't know if they're that good. So, we had a pretty extensive conversation about it today, and I said, are you sure we're not gonna get in trouble with, you know, the FAA or anything? He said, no, the requirements are the payload has to be under 5 pounds, and I guess the payload is only 2 pounds. So the students are really, really excited, so I think the game plan would be they're going to basically do this over a half a day in the morning on Thursday. I think I gave you a link to the website that details, I think it's on the one-to-one learning website, is it not?
Yeah, it is, it's top right of the recent posts. I just read it.
They said that having approval for a flexible alternative would be helpful. Does that mean they want to go to Ohio?
I think it is,
We did some last minute calculations.
Yeah, I think he says, potentially New Hampshire or something. I said, you know, but I guess they're now doing a vote for different types of tests that they can do with a ping pong ball in the payload.
Yeah.
Oh, there's our
Yeah,
student
yeah,
rep,
there's
there's
Maria.
Maria.
Oh, hi, Maria.
So like I said, I bring this to your attention, obviously for a vote, because it is an out-of-state field trip, but I just think by the very nature of this project, in my humble opinion, this is more of what we should be doing with all kids,
Cool.
where it's a
'Cause
completely
it's super hands-on. and
super
my
hands-on,
life.
super student-driven,
And the engagement factor, just the, you know.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Halfway through the
Super
roots.
It's just cool.
Yeah.
so,
Is it cool?
That kid is right.
It is, my kids would love this. This is awesome.
Yeah, it is.
So, I bring that to your attention for your approval, and your entertainment, so to speak, but we can do a follow-up, at a later school committee meeting.
But, so do we need to grant them permission to
Yeah,
travel out
just
of state?
a motion, yeah.
How many students is this?
I believe it's
Except
15?
for 15?
Parents will know the
Yes.
destination.
Mhm.
Excited.
Yeah, they won't take a van to Ohio. It'll be reasonable.
Okay.
Wait, so how are they getting there? Like, are they driving individually or
No,
They're
I
taking
believe
a-
Dave is contracted a minibus.
a minibus? Okay. Got it. Okay, so we need to make a motion.
So a motion to have the Marker Space Weather Balloon Project field trip be able to go to wherever their launching destination would be.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. I can't wait to hear the results.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun, yeah.
Trust me, they'll document it.
Oh, I hope so, I hope.
Yeah.
Video.
Assuming like that.
There'll be the, what do you call those cameras?
GoPro.
GoPros.
Yeah, and he told me it's going up 12,000 feet, so
Oh,
we'll be
wow.
talking 2 miles and change.
Wow.
Be interesting.
Excellent.
Interesting, very
Yeah.
interesting.
And he's gonna post all that on the one-to-one?
Yes.
Excellent. That's gonna be a lot of fun. We have 2 correspondents.
Yeah, one correspondence, and once again, I will send him a letter on behalf of the committee, but to Jimmy Grant, detailing the money that he raised, specifically, I believe it was $6,000 from his annual golf tournament. Of the 6,000, 4,000 has been fundraised that went to Clough, Misco, Nipmuc, and the Warriors Club. You know, once again, we greatly appreciate Jimmy's work on behalf of our kids. I just think it's outstanding. And then the second correspondence that you have is something that came to all superintendents from the Massachusetts Medical Society, and it's urging that the district adopt policy that requires all schools to maintain a supply of EpiPens. And they're recommending that you keep 2 generic EpiPens in addition to whatever pens the students bring in. Keep in mind, as I say in the background notes, both the Massachusetts Association of School Committees and MASS are against adopting formal policy, just for the simple reason of cost implications moving forward. I did speak with our school nurses. We do stock on an annual basis 1 EpiPen. That's budgeted. Each year, CVS in Milford does offer our schools at about a 50% reduction for generic EpiPens. So we do get that every year, and it's replaced on an annual basis.
What's the cost of every time for the school district?
I think the cost to them right now, to the school district is in the ballpark of about $50.
Joe, I have the MCAS Summer Institute in my folder.
I believe, yeah, this is also just,
Some workshops.
an advertisement for, the school committee association of various workshops that they're having. On, the 28th and the 29th of July. Somehow, there's a little bit of a disconnect if you look at this wonderful tropical picture. And it's being held at the Marriott Courtyard in Marlborough. Somehow, when I think of Marlborough, I don't think of
Same
Palm
thing, I was
Springs.
like, I didn't get it, that was a,
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
where are we going for school committee?
Maybe it was at least down at the gate.
Yeah.
Marlboro.
Are there any other matters not anticipated by the committee within 48 hours of the posted meeting? Future agenda items are the Golden Apple Award on June 20th and the one-to-one learning evaluation presentation on August 21st.
Golden Apple's actually on the 19th, right?
Well, you told me the 19th earlier, but I don't know what the,
I
I
think
haven't looked at the
Monday is
calendar.
the 19th. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 2 weeks from today. Why, is
Yeah,
there
yes,
something
this-
wrong on the
yeah.
agenda?
So it should
says
say the
20th,
19th.
but it's
20th is a Tuesday.
okay.
So we're going to make a motion to adjourn first
Yeah,
and then make a
just,
motion?
it's, the motion's right there.
All right, I make a motion to roll call to executive session pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A, exemption number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to the successor agreement to the teachers' collective bargaining agreement, because doing so in open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee. The committee will not return to open session.
Second. All in favor?
Roll
So
call.
it's roll call.
Sorry, roll call.
Diane Duncan, aye.
Sean Nicholson, aye.
Hannah Django, aye.
Lee Martin, aye.
So this meeting is adjourned at 8:24.